What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Join Mike on the air. Call toll-free 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443.
It's terrible today, and I apologize to our YouTube audience, but there really isn't anything I can do about the quality of internet coming from out here. Anyway, for those of you who this, and she created Mother's Day to celebrate her own mother, a caring, dedicated anti-war activist, and apparently Jarvis' mother Ann worked to heal the divisions in north central West Virginia following the Civil War. So in a way, Mother's Day was kind of an anti-war protest here. So in 1914, President actually became upset with its commercialization. So a little bit of a Frankenstein's monster story there. Now down in Australia, they have decided, because we're no longer living in a binary world of mothers and isn't anything of, and a carrier strike group and a bomber task force to the Central Command region. It's putting the decision was made in response to a number of any attack, whether by proxy, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard fire a rocket at a U.S. asset, and it will be blamed on Iran. Remember that whopper they told you about Saddam's nuclear weapons? Got to be prepared for more of the exact same thing. If you go back and you look throughout the whole history of war, you generally find overwhelming, the majority of them were started with some kind of a dirty trick, a false flag, or lies. Article coming out of Spectator is saying John Bolton is the problem. He's doing his work. They're claiming that, and it may well be. I think that's probably Spectrum, especially. And Marco Rubio, who is a hardcore neocon and wants to regime change Venezuela, he's out there claiming that China is secretly propping up Maduro by hacking the internet. And so Rubio or social media and siege. Wednesday evening, Metropolitan D.C. Police cut off the power. Diplomatic Conventions, Article 25, which reads, the receiving state shall accord full facilities for the performance of the function of the diplomatic mission. Of course, the U.S. government is probably taking the position that that's no longer the Venezuelan. So getting on back to Iran, Colonel Larry Wilkerson was looking at the statement released by John Bolton back on May 5th about, yes, it absolutely does. Okay,
in the area of the Middle East, I wanted to. Now, ironically, I know I'm not criticizing the New Testament in any way, but do you remember the name of the character that Pontius Pilate wanted to release instead of crucifying Jesus?
You mean Barabbas?
Barabbas, okay.
Yes.
You know that in the ancient Canaanite dialect, Bar means son and Bat meant daughter. Bar Abbas. I read that Abbas's ancestry, he'd had an ancestor that was a rabbi. When I broke down the name Bar Abbas, it all made sense. So talk about, it's not just the distortion of the Old Testament. I sent you an email that I hope you get, if you get a chance to read that, about the Declaration of Independence of Israel and how Ben Gurion twisted himself in knots when he tried to avoid acknowledging that they were invaders and not indigenous to the land of Canaan. I hope you will read that and perhaps post it to your website. Meanwhile, the YouTube is a nightmare, so I have to hope that it's not going to be removed from access to people like me.
Well, at the moment, it seems to be streaming out of here at a nice, steady clip, so whatever the problems were seem to have gone away. Of course, I can't tell what it looks like from your end. I had somebody who wrote in and said, try restarting the stream, but when I went to do that, I noticed the little status indicator is saying, you know, it's working fine now. So hopefully, hello, YouTube audience, and I hope it's all working for you.
Hopefully so. Thank you. And again, thank you for all your efforts. I don't know if your show is going to be allowed to stay on YouTube much longer. There have been so many terrible changes to YouTube, and I fear that down the road somewhere you're going to be removed. So if that is the case, please know that although I'm sure there are times when you feel frustrated, you're just one person in a large sea of humanity. And if the rest of us have failed to act early enough and recognize early enough what you saw and tried to alert us to, that is not your fault. Do not take it upon yourself. You've done wonderful work in trying to enlighten us and to warn us that danger was coming. Essentially, you're like the canary. And hopefully not, hopefully not, but thank you anyway for your efforts.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words.
Well, 3 hours every day, Mike, that's very, very difficult. That's extremely strenuous. And yet you've been doing it every day for how many years?
I've been doing the radio. I've been doing the radio for a little over 10 years now. I've been doing the website for a quarter of a century. And it is very strenuous. It's not just the 3 hours on the air, it's the prep time before. So that I've got a program to do here. But you're right. These days, as I start to really feel my age, I am feeling the frustration. And I had somebody actually say, you should be feeling pretty good. Everything that you were predicting was going to happen 10 years ago has happened. And I said, no, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted all of this, to just turn out to be a fantasy. I actually wanted to be a tinfoil hat wearing kook.
Yes, exactly. You wanted it to be just a conspiracy, quote, theory. But unfortunately, you were enlightened and you were aware, and too many people were far too happy to just kick back, watch a football game or whatever, soap opera, and drink a can of beer and forget about the world until it came banging on their door and they had to end up living in tents. And by then it's too late.
Yes.
So, but if anything does happen, we're not able to reach you in the future, please know that you have the gratitude of many people. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't realize what you've done, but I recognize what you've done, and there are, I'm sure, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, like me, who appreciate your efforts. So be well, and I hope the best for Claire. Take care. Bye for now.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Layla. And again, thank you for the very, very kind words. Yeah, it's been a rough 25 years. What can I tell you? And I'm feeling it these days. It is depressing. What can I tell you? Anyway, getting on back to the war zones here. Article out of antiwar.com. U.S. officials continue to falsely accuse Iran of a planned attack. And now that we had for attack the United States, knowing it opens the door to invasion. Iran does not want to be invaded. They just want to be left alone to conduct business. Bolton's claim, it doesn't make sense. Iran knows they're not prepared to fight a war with the United States, therefore they're not going to start one. Very worrying report coming out of the Millennium Report, saying that an insider is saying that Israel is in fact poised to stage a false flag attack against U.S. targets to get the war going with Iran. Okay. Meanwhile, the United States Air Force has deployed more B-52 Stratoforce bombers in Qatar, and it's part of a larger U.S. military buildup in the region, touted as the countermeasure to an unspecified threat from Iran. We don't know what they're going to do to us. We don't know what they could do to us, but by golly, we know those evil Iranians are coming from us. So the strategic bombers arrived at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar last night, and they were provided by the 20th Bomb Squadron of Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Other B-52s have been deployed to an unspecified location in Southwest Asia. So it looks like they're gearing up for real here. Now, the carrier strike group, USS Abraham Lincoln, is now in the Red Sea. They got there a little bit earlier than planned. They must have put pedal to the metal coming down through the canal. And they're now basically officially in the U.S. Fifth Fleet and U.S. Central Command. Now, the commander overseeing the U.S. naval forces in the Middle East, in an interview with Reuters, said that he is willing to send the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group through the Strait of Hormuz into the waters just off of Iran. That would be a little bit risky depending upon what Iran has at the Strait of Hormuz. But this is very, very tough talk. And by the way, a Marine Expeditionary Unit on the Kearsarge has already transited the Strait of Hormuz and is now cruising back and forth along the Iranian coast. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Doug in Malaysia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Great to get through to you as a first-time caller. I've been listening a couple of months now and reading what really happened for years. I would talk about Iran. Seems to me like the Israelis have a little plan to do one of their early June hits, and something like with the Iraq nuclear power station when it was ready to go online, cut the ribbon, and here come the F-16s or 15s, were at the time.
Yep.
1981, was it 82? What was that one they bombed the Lebanese Beirut airport at the same basic time of year?
Yeah, well,
coming right up on it.
The weather does control a lot of what's going on over in that part of the world, but you're right. Israel bombed Iraq's civilian nuclear power station after claiming there was a secret bomb factory in the basement, the way Israel has at Dimona. Following the Iraq War, international experts examined the remains of al-Sarak and determined it had just been a power station. So yeah, we got to be very careful about this stuff. But it does, with all the hardware being sent over to that part of the world.
You know, the Iranians would have to sit there and take it like Saddam did. There was nothing he could do.
Yeah, it's going to be very much a one-sided war.
That's the hardest lesson, and we talk about being silenced. What's happening to these people? Right, I feel so bad, but they're out there. I want to express appreciation for your efforts.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're from New England, I heard. I thought you're from Hawaii all this time. I was like,
oh, no. I was born in Boston. I spent my childhood on a farm in New England, then moved to California with my family.
I'm from Northampton.
Okay.
I'm a Massachusetts person myself, so a little blood for...
Well, would love to get back there, or at least to Indiana. My problem is coming up with the money to do it. So we're Hawaiian sourdoughs. We're sour on Hawaii. We don't have the dough to leave.
I think you're making a good movie.
Okay, we have to let you go. It's time for a commercial break. I'm going to go ahead and restart the YouTube stream and see if it clears up a little bit. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hola, Mike. Remember that movie, War Games?
Yes.
Where it shows where all the flashpoints in the globe where World War III can start. Do you think Venezuela is one of those flashpoints?
I think any place on Earth could be the flashpoint to start a war if war is what everybody wants.
Especially World War III?
Especially World War III. Now, in the movie War Games, those computer simulations were showing basically nuclear weapons in use, and to the best of my knowledge, Venezuela is not a nuclear power.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Turning on back to Iran here. Just a little while ago, Iran was talking really tough. They were talking about closing the Strait of Hormuz. They were talking about going back to high enrichment. And they have had a change of heart. And now they're saying they want to bring the nuclear deal back on track and possibly strengthen it. And this came from a spokesman from the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran yesterday. And that was just one day after Tehran said it was scaling back curbs to its nuclear program. So it may be there's a little bit of a faction fight going on in Iran over just what they're going to be doing. Meanwhile, Iran has announced they may start expelling Afghan refugees as the U.S. tightens sanctions, simply because taking care of the refugees is costing money that Iran just doesn't have anymore. According to officials, more than 3 million Afghan refugees are living in Iran. 2 million of them are working within the country. But Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Syed Abbas Araghchi said Iran would ask the refugees to go home if sanctions are increased, adding that the migrants are sending 3 to 5 billion euros to Afghanistan. Same thing the illegal immigrants are doing here. They work, they take the money, they send it back home. Araghchi said there are 468,000 Afghan students are getting free education in schools. Every student costs 600 euros on an average basis. Over in North Korea, they're continuing their missile tests, and apparently they conducted yet another weapons test overnight, firing 2 missiles into the sea between North Korea and Japan. And it was the second test for North Korea the past week. And the U.S. military conducted its own missile test just 10 minutes later. But the Air Force stresses that the timing was just coincidental. So everybody's out there playing with their little rockets and stuff. We reported earlier in the week the United States has seized a North Korean coal carrier ship called the MV Wise Honest for violating U.S. sanctions on the country. The ship was apparently seized down in Indonesia under a civil forfeiture complaint. And this was announced by Assistant Attorney General for National Security, John C. Demers, U.S. Attorney Jeffrey S. Berman for the Southern District of New York, Assistant Director John Brown of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, and Assistant Director William F. Sweeney, Jr. of the FBI's New York Field Office. So it's a 17,000 ton bulk carrier ship, one of North Korea's largest, which was being used to ship coal from North Korea and deliver heavy machinery back. So, okay. The Marine Corps just got a new toy to play with. It's manufactured in Norway by Kongsberg Defense and Aerospace. It's called the NSM. It features a 275-pound high-explosive warhead and has an operational range of more than 100 nautical miles. And apparently they did test fire it last year out here in Hawaii at the RIMPAC exercise, where the U.S. Army fired an NSM from a palletized load system truck to hit a decommissioned ship off the coast of Hawaii. Here's an article coming out of National Interest, and it's called F-35 Deja Vu. And it's talking about how, having learned nothing from the lessons of Vietnam, in particular relating to the F-4, the Phantom F-4, the U.S. is making the same mistake again. Now, when the Phantom F-4 was built, it was built in an era where it was thought that air-to-air engagements would involve shooting missiles at each other, and there wouldn't really be any dogfighting. In fact, the original version of the F-4 didn't have an onboard cannon. And when they went up against the much more maneuverable MiGs, things went very, very badly wrong. The MiGs could avoid the missiles because they could maneuver so quickly, and they understood if they could get into dogfighting range, they could take the F-4s down, and they did. Okay, we have to take a break for commercials. I'm going to do the rest of the story when we come back. We have a caller waiting on the line, so stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. So we're talking about the history of the Phantom F-4 and Vietnam, where they just said, we're not going to dogfight anymore. Our missiles will do the work for us. The missiles turned out to be less than 100% effective. The much more maneuverable MiGs could basically just jink ahead of them coming on in, and the missiles would break lock. And then the MiGs would get in close to the F-4s, get them into a dogfight, and basically shoot them down. And as I mentioned before the commercial break, the first versions of the Phantom F-4 didn't even have an onboard gun. Now, they added one later in a belly pod. It was called the G-pod. So here we have the F-35, the most expensive weapon system ever built by the United States. Back in January of 2015, they did an experiment. They took an F-35A against a 25-year-old F-16D in a dogfight, which the F-16 won. But the Air Force is out there saying not to worry. The F-35's technology is designed to engage, shoot, and kill the enemy from long distances, not necessarily in a visual dogfighting situation. Deja vu all over again. Okay, let's take some phone calls. Pat in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you were talking about Venezuela, and that you didn't, that they weren't going to attack us. There's things you don't know about, and prophets have told it, and I knew somebody that didn't even know the prophets, and she told it. And what it was Chavez, I guess Maduro will do the same thing, was planning on attacking us, and he was going to do it behind El Salvador, which everybody thought was a friend, and that Iran was one of them, and Cuba was going to join. But I started watching, and all of a sudden, Ahmadinejad went over there hugging up Chavez. He pictures of him even in the book that Chavez wrote. And, of course, you know, Chavez had cancer, so he went to Cuba regularly for his medical treatment. So Cuba didn't have to go. And I don't remember who else went there, but I think it was China. But I didn't see Russia or Putin. But
okay, Pat, can we step back here a little bit to your claim that Venezuela wants to attack the United States? Tell me, why would they want to do so? Because the same rationale applies to Venezuela as applies to Iran. They want to be left alone. They don't want to have a retaliatory strike hit them.
Well, one thing is people can check this out, have a better internet service, better, access to internet. But when Neil Bush drove his Silverado into the ground, it was because he spent all the money buying oil wells in Venezuela, and Chavez nationalized them. And he always told everybody, all his people, that we were going to attack them. And GW went down there, and he.
Yeah, well, really, that's a motive for the United States to attack Venezuela, not for Venezuela to attack the United States.
No, you ask me, why would they want to attack us? Well, what it was, they planned on attacking us all simultaneously all over the country with crop duster type planes. You know how it was on 9/11 when everything is going on at the same time. Confusion. And I do know, I believe that Putin and Iran both want Venezuela, and they kind of are going to be enemies that way. But I'm just trying to say that just watch what happens, because Maduro is going to do what Chavez did, don't you think?
No, I don't think. I don't think. It's not real world. Russia and China have economic interests in Venezuela. There's no question about that. But they're not in direct competition with each other. No, I don't agree with you on this one. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Mike in Kentucky. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, that was a little entertaining. We can
Be gentle.
I am. I'm being John. I'm about to get a little sideways myself here, but there's a lot of stuff about this nukes that it gets reported, and I don't know if probably mostly the reporters don't understand what they're reporting, and they're just taking the public relations press release from the government and just going with it, and they're thinking that we're just dumb. I mean, anybody that's been studying this surely has realized a lot of stuff about the nuclear power industry since Fukushima that maybe wasn't obvious, because they had to explain what happened there. And I don't think it was fully explained because maybe you've talked about Stuxnet may have been that had arrived there sometime before.
Well, that may have complicated what was going on at Fukushima, but let's be very honest. It was that quake and tsunami meeting scaled back design.
Also the cost savings of looking at the photos of people standing there behind the thing, taking video of the water coming around the backside of the reactors, and they're standing on high ground where the waves would have never been, and we're only talking a few hundred feet. You could have had the generators and the reactors up a little bit higher. Now, gradually, I mean, that would cause a little slight efficiency problem. It wouldn't be as an efficient thing because you have to pump the water up into a tank first or something. But
yeah, and it would cost money. It would have cost money. Now we saved
$600,000 by putting the generators in the basement. I mean, but oh my gosh, we did trillions in damage, priceless damage to things that won't be fixed for decades. But one of the things I wanted to get at was, and Iran's nuclear program is back in the news now. We got a 30-day clock ticking, and they're boogie to the fear on that. Trump needs to fix this. It's gonna go. They're going to be free.
Yeah, they're really going to do it.
Well, where is the headlines that says Iran now has 10,000 of these dang aluminum tube efficient gaseous diffusion centrifuges? It never is in the news because they don't have that many. Our Superfund sites like Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant here in Kentucky and Oak Ridge down in Tennessee, where probably Israel stole a bunch of materials, who knows, and we've got one up in Ohio in Portsmouth, I think, not too far from us. They're all messy Superfund sites, and they're huge.
Yes.
It takes a big facility to make 30% enriched uranium, which is what Turkey and Japan got in trouble for when they said, okay, yeah, we'll take some of your yellow cake or 3% enriched uranium, and we'll give you some, a few pounds of 30% enriched uranium so you can do medical research. But heaven forbid we had a dang earthquake weapon do the tsunami there. I mean, but what I'm getting at is how many nukes would Israel have to have well placed to hold the entire world hostage? Have you looked at that?
Well,
how many nukes would they have to?
There's always been a question about this unexplained source of radiation at Israel's New York consulate, because when the nuclear emergency search team was first setting up their operation, they did what they called profiling flights over major cities, identifying existing sources of radiation, so that if there was a case where somebody claimed to have smuggled a nuclear weapon into the city, they wouldn't go chasing after false leads. And these profiling flights detected radiation coming from Israel's New York consulate. Israel, of course, refuses inspections. But if you remember that Israel got their first round of weapons-grade uranium from right here in the United States of America, it would have been trivial for them to leave some of it behind and craft a bomb around it. Because once you've got the weapons-grade uranium, the bomb part is easy. It's just basically a big tube. And you have a less than critical mass chunk of uranium at both ends. You slap them together, it goes bang.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is to play right into your war as a racket, all wars are bankers' war video, which I've watched several times, that people have made slideshows to illustrate that. I'm sure you've, had people email you copies, or you've watched a few of them. There's, I think, a couple of different versions. They want to control. I don't think, the game here is to control. not to destroy. So the war that they want, apparently, I mean, and, you know, there's brinkmanship, you know, trying to make China blink, the Brazil, Russia, India, China.
Yeah, there's a
BRICS,
lot of
you know,
brinksmanship.
But it's like a big Mexican standoff with you know, a lot. I don't know how many players here between Israel and Britain and the Vatican and, you know, the BRICS. But I don't think it would take too many nukes for Israel to actually have strategically placed without, you know, the unless there's some really sophisticated satellite technology that could spot these things. I'm not talking about the one that may be in New York or, you know, really small stuff, but a dirty bomb in New York, I mean, what's that do to the world markets, you know? There's apparently several islands off the coast of Africa where nukes could be placed that would cause a unstable shelf slide. And there's geological evidence on the fall line hills in the Carolinas and places that shows these tsunamis have occurred in the past.
Yeah, we're talking about Cumbre Vieja and that giant volcano there, and the whole western side is unstable. It's already slid down a little bit. Somebody could smuggle a small nuke into the inside of the volcano through the lava tubes and set it off, and it would just create this gigantic mega tsunami.
Across most of the Atlantic and the Anglo-American Empire would be fairly well destroyed. It might even inundate a lot of England and Portugal and places like that. So there's just one scenario. Now, one of the things about North Korea that kept hearing reporting was he does not have a re-entry vehicle to get a nuke to the ground. Well, you know, who cares? If he had 2 or 3 that he could pop over the United States, that would certainly wreak some havoc with various things just from the electronic pulse, just like it happened in Hawaii back when they tested them in when was that, 62?
Yeah.
Or something, when they tested one in space and it took down the power grid in Hawaii. Now that was ancient history. Technology is supposed to be better.
That's where they discovered the AMP effect. Nobody had any idea it was going to happen.
And then they banned testing weapons in space, I think, because of that. They got the Russians to agree to a nuclear test ban for space, I think, ended up being a result, which makes you wonder, did they do that because they wanted that treaty? But so, you know, there's several things we're missing here. If I just had 1 or 2 nukes and I wanted to destroy America and I could get one to the ground, I believe I'd hit Yellowstone and unleash that caldera. Just one nuke would probably devastate most of the United States, and because of all the nuclear wreck.
Having looked at the surveys of the caldera under Yellowstone, I'm not sure there's a nuclear weapon that's really capable of punching through. We wouldn't know until somebody actually tried, and we'd prefer that we not do that. But you're right. If Yellowstone were to blow, it would wipe out most of the United States and a good chunk of Canada as well, which would be very rude for us to do to the Canadians.
Well, obviously, you know, if you're trying to do a Mexican standoff, though, here and make the world safe for your greater Zionist empire, there's strategies here that would be force multipliers besides you know, spying in through the NARIS devices on everybody. Did you catch that story last week that the Fourth Amendment was violated because of chalking tires up in I think it was a federal district court up in Minnesota or something, ruled that chalking tires is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And then even though they're charging Ed Snowden with the same documents, the Electronic Frontier Foundation's case got thrown out because the judge says, well, the government's not going to confirm the evidence you've entered here. It would reveal top secret stuff. But yet they're charging Snowden, I think in Carolinas, in a federal district court with the same evidence. Is this the Twilight Zone? Or what?
It's a circus. It's bizarro world. It really is. All right, well, listen, Mike, we're going to let you go here and switch over to Art Off the Grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I got to thinking earlier today, you know, this whole deal with Venezuela. And it almost sounds, you know, I'm kind of in agreement with you. It sounds kind of like they're setting up for some type of conflict, if you will, or a skirmish. Well, And I got to thinking, one of the things that goes along with these skirmishes, and that's putting it politely, are sanctions. And sanctions are, if anyone actually knows what the hell they're talking about, sanctions are an act of war. Now, sanctions are automatically put in place when you get into these kind of conflicts with other countries. Now, what I'm wondering is, how is this, if it goes there and sanctions are forced upon Venezuela because of this, how is that going to affect companies like Valero, which is owned by Venezuela, or owned through the subsidy of Coastal States Gas Corp through La Boca Gathering Company, Citgo, which is basically run through PDVSA, which is a state-owned company of the Venezuelan government, and Chevron, which owns 25.2% of Petro Independiente and 30% of Petro PR, both of which are joint ventures with PDVSA, Venezuela's Orinoco Belt.
So, okay. I'm sorry, I got a little lost. Can we back up here a little bit?
These are three gas stations which you find all throughout the United States: Citgo, Chevron, and
True.
Valero.
And
which are partially, if you break it down, they're partially owned by the Venezuelan government.
yes,
Now, if we end up skirmish with Venezuela and sanctions are placed against them, what kind of effect is that going to have on these gas stations and the people who work there? This is something no one has talked about. No one.
well, you bring up a very good point, and unfortunately, listen, I'm going to have to put you on hold, and don't hang up, and we're going to come back and talk about this after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Art Off the Grid, and we're talking about the fact that there are a lot of gas stations inside the United States that are owned through various corporate links, ultimately by Venezuela itself, and what would happen to them in the event of a war. Well, it depends on whether it's an official war or not. In an official war, the U.S. government could simply confiscate all those assets and, turn them over to the other big oil providers, gas station operators in this country. The other issue would be, well, they might have to actually find other sources for their product if, in fact, there were sanctions being placed on Venezuela's oil. So it could drive a lot of them out of business. Art, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. So what's your comment?
Well, yeah, see, that was what I was getting at because, I'm 56 years old, and I spent over half my life, about 33 years altogether total, traveling around the country, and I've met a lot of people, and I know people that work at all of these different gas stations, and I know them very well because I've lived in their homes, I've gotten personally involved with them, and, when we start talking about these things, like going into Venezuela and all this, nobody seems to be thinking about the actual impact that this would have on hardworking Americans who probably don't even agree with this. And if they had to, if these places had to go looking for other sources for their fuel, like you said, a lot of them will most likely go out of business. And how does that benefit anybody? It doesn't. It benefits absolutely no one except the war machine. And what does it produce? Bullets, bombs, and bodies.
Yes.
That's it.
That's definitely it. Well, our country is already suffering from all of these wars, and I think the vast majority of the American people disagree with all these wars. I think the revelation that we got tricked into the war in Iraq with those Saddam's nukes lies, people have turned sour. We're a war-weary nation, and I haven't seen any of the corporate media come out with any polls saying, do you support the U.S. going into Venezuela? And even if they did, I wouldn't believe what they said in the polls.
Yeah, probably not. But I just wanted to bring that up, get people thinking about that because, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at good, hardworking Americans losing their jobs, more businesses shutting down, and that doesn't benefit us in any way. It's only going to benefit the war hawks and such as that. But people need to start thinking about the actual real impacts of, you hear people talking about, well, when you put sanctions on Iran and all of this, the poor Iranian people, they're the ones that are really suffering from these economic and sanctions and blah, 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 blah. But nobody ever thinks about the impact it has on Americans as well. And, I, for one, and I speak for no one but myself, but I like to think that there's a lot of other people out there who feel the same way I do. I am sick and tired of being stabbed in the back at every turn. I'm fed up with it. I've had enough.
Yeah, well, me too. Put me in that same area. All right, well, listen, Art, we're going to let you go here. We're coming up on station identification. We got another caller waiting on the far side when we get into hour number 2, so stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we are going to go to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Mike, I don't know if you got this news yet about the Pentagon moving the USS Arlington amphibious assault ship and a couple Patriot missile batteries to the Middle East.
Yeah, I got it.
I don't know if this is all for just intimidation because, with this Washington Post article coming out about Trump saying John Bolton's trying to get us into but does Trump realize he's putting all this, the aircraft carrier and all our troops staying in these, he's making them targets by Israel. They can target these people and blame the Iranians. I still don't understand why does John Bolton still have his job? This was at least a day or two ago.
He's doing his job. He's doing his job. Clearly his job, the reason he is there is to get these wars going with Venezuela and Iran. And he's certainly not a diplomat. That little diplomatic faux pas that he did over in Germany, where he was scheduled to meet with Angela Merkel, and then he just calls it off and heads for Iraq. Diplomats aren't supposed to do that.
I'm saying, why would Donald Trump say he's trying to get us into war? Well, get rid of John Bolton then. Pull all this stuff back. Call up Iran and make some deals, man, economic deals. Not this way is the wrong way because you're going to end up like George Bush, stuck with the lie. Either George Bush was involved with the lie, most likely. But I don't know, man. It's just we got stupid people running the country.
Yes, we do.
Point. And another part of me says they're moving all this equipment because they're going to do something stupid. So part of me says it's a bluff. Another part of me says maybe not. I don't know, but I probably would need more than one amphibious assault craft to storm the beaches of Iran. Huh?
Well, it all depends on where you're headed here. And by the way, I did misspoke. It was Pompeo that did that diplomatic faux pas with Merkel and not Bolton. But it's still, they're crazy people out there until you look at the situation from their point of view, which is the United States is in serious trouble. We've lost our manufacturing. We've lost our economic domination of the rest of the world. We're on the verge of that. Nobody wants our agriculture, and the economy is just in this huge, huge mess. And they're going back and they're relying on previous history, which is every time the United States government gets the economy this badly messed up, they try and fix it or at least distract from it by getting into a world war. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and here we are. Look how many different countries the United States is operating in militarily.
You said something about the admiral saying he's going to move the aircraft carrier into the Strait of Hormuz.
Saying he would be willing to do so. That he would be willing to send the Abraham Lincoln through the Strait of Hormuz and basically sail it up and down along Iran's coast. And apparently the Kearsarge is already there.
With all the support ships, it'd be like a sitting duck. They got all those anti-ship missiles lying in the coast. I mean, that's to make a comment like that kind of tells me it's like a bluff. You know, like to come out and say something that's not an authorized statement. You know, to just come out and say something like that's not very diplomatic-like. You know what I mean? But
Well, the admiral isn't a diplomat.
But he should still have a code of conduct. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just just a conduct that we should have, not blurting out these crazy things like the State Department does, and and all these other people do. They just, like our Congress and Senate, they say these crazy things too. You know, it's like there's just no moral, like dignity
Well,
and honor
what they're
anymore.
doing is they're sending messages, and this admiral says this, and he waits to see what Iran's reaction is going to be.
And Mike, before I get off the phone, that woman who called Pat, where
Yes.
did she get her information from? Like, because crop dusters, we heard the same crap with Iraq, and the crop dusters were as big as my foot.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sorry, but why would they attack us? We're attacking each other in this country. Like, they got no reason to attack us. We're running away.
There's
They
no
gotta
reason.
attack us. Yeah.
The only ones doing the attacking these days are the United States and Israel. And these other countries, they don't want to attack us. They want to be left alone. They want to engage in commerce. They want to engage in trade. They just want to be left alone. But the exceptional America is still out there saying, no, 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 no. We're going to rule the world. You're going to run all of your economies through us. You're going to use our currency, and we're going to control everything, in our infinite mercy.
But it just makes me laugh. We're always saying they're going to attack us. They're going to attack. We're the aggressor.
Yes.
We're attacking everybody. So I don't know where this whole mentality is of they're attacking us. I mean, we have 600 to 800 military bases around the world. Okay.
Yes.
You know, Russia has what? 2. China has maybe 2.
One on the way to 2.
Who's the hegemonic empire? All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Dustin. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And getting on back to the news, Juan Guaido's deputy, Luis Florido, who was being prosecuted for the failed coup, has succeeded in fleeing to Colombia. And he posted a video on Twitter earlier today saying, "I'm out of the country in Colombia, safe from a regime ready to imprison deputies." Well, you did side with the coup d'etat here. Apparently back in Syria, the U.S. military and their allies in the Syrian Democratic Forces have opened fire on a Syrian government ferry that was attempting to transport oil in the Euphrates River Valley. So apparently Syria is still a shooting war between the United States and the evil Bashar al-Assad. Okay, I'm going to skip this one. Get on down to, okay. Not too long ago, there was an Air Force intelligence officer, and his name is Daniel Everett. He's 31 of Nashville. And he was arrested and charged with espionage for leaking information to the press detailing how the U.S. government used armed drones for secret assassinations in foreign countries. So he's basically a whistleblower. And it looks like from the timing that his information was being used by The Intercept for a series called The Drone Papers. And the series documented the secret use of drones to kill human targets, both in countries in which we're engaged in authorized military action, like Afghanistan, and countries where we are not, like Yemen and Somalia. Now, the United States has come under serious criticism for the high number of civilian casualties that are being, killed in all of this indiscriminate missile and bombing. So the Wall Street Journal has reported that the United States has cut down on a new weapon to specifically target terrorists and not cause a lot of damage around it. It's called the Sledgehammer Hellfire missile. And what it does, it doesn't have explosives inside it. As it gets close to its intended target, these samurai sword-like blades pop out of the nose in this big ring, this big circle, 6 of them. And they just basically slice into the intended target. So it's the ninja drone. Getting into our domestic politics here, James Clapper was out there talking about, did the Obama administration spy on the Trump camp? And Clapper said, well, we were certainly looking, but it was probably okay. And we don't use the term spying anyway, because it's got a negative connotation, a rogue operation, out of control, not in compliance with the law. So he's trying to sell us that all this surveillance is perfectly harmless. You know, we're just being James Bond here. Anyway, James Comey is out there still insisting it sure looks like Trump obstructed justice during the Mueller probe. Says there is evidence to charge him when he leaves office. But Comey himself may be in some serious legal trouble himself. Meanwhile, Donald Trump Jr. has been subpoenaed by a Republican-controlled Senate committee, specifically Richard Burr and Lindsey Graham, and they have Russia-related questions. What they're doing is they're going back and looking at that Trump Tower Moscow project. Was it on the up and up, or was there undue influence? I mean, they're just digging. And again, I have to, why bother? Trump is giving them everything that they want. Is all of this just revenge because he defeated the anointed candidate back in 2016? And by the way, speaking of the anointed candidate, the U.S. media is coming on out, and they're hitting this meme over and over again, that Biden is the new Clinton, which I'm not sure is a positive. And earlier today, Fox News had this poll that they put up showing how the top 3 leading Democrat candidates could all defeat Donald Trump in 2020. Of course, they were telling us that Hillary was going to defeat Donald Trump back in 2016, so I wouldn't put too much stock in that. Now, having just finished this rather lukewarm speaking tour, Hillary Clinton is now up in New Hampshire, which is the first primary state. And so she's basically up there lecturing about her decades of experience in world affairs as a career politician. And this article, which came out of the American Mirror, is saying, is she running a non-campaign campaign for president? And I would say absolutely yes, that's probably what's happening. Out in California, Democrats are beginning to gather around Pete Buttigieg, and that is leaving Kamala Harris in an increasingly tenuous position. We're going to start seeing shakeouts here. I mean, we've got 20 Democratic candidates. We're coming up on the point where some are going to start dropping out. But Democratic strategist Gary South has watched the Buttigieg wave break on California shores. And he says the amazing thing is that nobody is ceding California to Kamala Harris. No one is abandoning California to the native daughter, which tells you something. Why would he come out here and spend 4 days if he thought she had California locked out? So, looks like he's one of the breakout leaders. Elizabeth Warren, following in the footsteps of Barack Obama, is out there campaigning saying, we need big government. Nobody in America succeeds on their own. And that does sound very much like Obama's infamous 2012 speech. If you've got a business, you didn't build that. So like Obama, Warren believes it is not American ingenuity and hard work, but the federal government that makes the people and the country great. And no, it doesn't. Every time the government gets involved in business, bad things happen. Remember the breakup of the telephone company and what a mess that was? Now, the good news here is that Chelsea Manning is out of jail. She was released yesterday following months of detention for contempt for refusing to testify before a grand jury investigation into WikiLeaks. The mandate of the grand jury in question has expired, and for that reason, she's been allowed out. That's the good news. The bad news is they're convening a new grand jury, so she could find herself back in jail yet again. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Peter in California. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I was just listening to what you were saying about politics and all that, the political campaigns, and wanted to continue on something that I said a little bit yesterday, and that is all the things that Trump ran on that people voted for.
Yes.
That he was actually elected on and got votes. You know, cleaning up, you know, the swamp, fixing the border, keeping us out of wars, the whole list of things that Trump was going to do and was voted on, and people actually exercised their vote to get him. And then you look at, and of course, nothing was done on any of those.
Yes.
And then you look at the things that he was paid to do, right? And Dustin was saying Bolton's come out and said that he realized Bolton wants war. Well, yeah, but Bolton's still there. That's right. Bolton was paid. He was paid to have Bolton there, and Bolton's there. He's still there. You know, he was paid to have Pompeo there. They're like a team, a horrible loser team. You know, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello. He was, you know, he was paid to get the Golan Heights and the Jerusalem. He was paid to get Israel all their increase in aid and everything else, and he's delivered on nothing else. Nothing else at all.
I agree.
But the other thing is, Mike, that's a good starting point for considering that the bottom line, continuing that line of thought, the bottom line in America is it's pay to play for everything. If votes don't mean anything, what counts are dollars.
Yes.
And the billionaires that own us all.
The Benjamins.
And for the most part, we know who they are. We know who they are, and we also know who the people who own the media, and it's a lot of the same people. And none of those people they're getting everything they want. They're getting tax breaks, and they're getting their wars, and of course we're going to war with Iran, or about to, and so on. And by the way, if one of the things are, like we're talking about Valero and Citgo and all these places that gentleman Art Off the Grid mentioned about partially owned by Venezuela, well, maybe that's part of it. Maybe we just want to not only take over their interests as well as taking the oil itself, and I mean,
the U.S. government may consider it payback for the nationalization of U.S. oil company assets in Venezuela. So they're going to nationalize all the gas stations.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to bring up about Kamala Harris that maybe a lot of the listeners aren't aware of. She made her name in San Francisco as a prosecutor, and she did that as a pretty high visibility prosecutor when Willie Brown was the mayor. Remember Willie Brown?
I remember Willie Brown.
And other than being, by the way, a toady to Israel, her husband is Jewish, and she keeps touting about, how she really is a Zionist, and she really is. They're paying her all. But she made her bones in San Francisco while she was sleeping with the married, it's well known, the married Willie Brown. There are articles on this.
Uh-huh.
So Willie Brown was married, and of course he was then giving her political favor and so on. And yet you'll hear all this stuff about Trump and Stormy Daniels and all that, but nobody mentions that she was, basically screwing her way up the political ladder with a married guy. Nobody mentions that at all. Have you heard that anywhere else?
No, I haven't. And, I remember vaguely from a while ago, but again, the corporate media right now is biased so much in favor of the Democrats, you're not going to see any of that stuff come on out. Anyway, listen, Peter, I got to let you go. We've got to do a commercial break, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You and Peter were just talking, and you started talking when Peter phoned in and started talking. It was actually kind of one of the first times I really heard anything that made any sense on this program so far with people that are phoning in. There's not going to be some big, huge war. It's not going to happen. But what may happen is grinding a bunch of military equipment up. That may happen.
Yes.
Who owns all this stuff, Mike? You don't. I don't. We used a term with Peter, and if you look at who owns all this stuff, who are the media companies out there? There's only a few. Comcast, Time Warner, Disney, I think Google's in there now. Who owns that stuff, Mike? Those are the people.
The stockholders primarily, and
primarily.
Same with the defense contractors.
I think stockholders are suckers, because what they do are they're like little dams. They just shore the company up while it plays its little financial wizardry, and it turns around, buys back its own shares, and basically pays themselves doing such a great job at conning everybody.
Yes.
Right? So, even the millionaires out there, maybe the 0.2% people, they're also suckers too. They're also being played, they're being lied to, and they're being used. And it's for money and power.
Yeah, that's what they're after.
It's a game of risk. Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
Yep.
Okay, anything else, Al?
Yep, Warren Buffett, a few years ago, bought Heinz, right?
Yes.
And in Ontario, Leamington, Ontario, they had a Heinz plant there, and which happened to be the tomato capital of Canada.
Yes.
And what's the first thing he does when he buys Heinz? He shuts it down. It's crazy. So there you go. Those are the kinds of games they play, and all to drive up the cost of ketchup.
Well,
that plant was making too much money.
No, it may have been that he wanted another plant to get the business, and that wouldn't be the first time that's happened. I mean, it goes back a long way, where large corporations will buy out their competition in order to deliberately shut them down. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. But that makes sense. Now there's another ketchup company there that makes ketchup. I can't think of the name because I don't buy it either. Right? I make my own. Anyway, thanks a lot for your time, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And there's nothing unusual about that, where these large hedge funds or corporate interests will buy up companies that represent their competition, because competition drives down prices. So you buy up your competitor, you shut them down, and then you can jack your prices up and make a huge profit. Okay, so phone lines are empty. Patrick Shanahan has been the acting Secretary of Defense, and as of today, Donald Trump has said he's doing a great job, and so he is nominating Shanahan to continue to serve as Defense Secretary. And so it's going to go through another confirmation there. I don't think it will be as colorful as the Kavanaugh one. Getting into the economic news here, Trump tweeted a tweet saying no need to rush on the China trade talks. Then he deleted it. Then he retweeted it. which I think is signs of complete and utter chaos over there. And apparently the most recent round of negotiations have now ended without any resolution. So those new higher tariffs are in place for at least the foreseeable future. And China, of course, is now threatening a tit-for-tat retaliation. Trade wars can be dangerous. The last full-bore trade war we had was back in 1930, and it helped make the Depression of the 1930s much, much worse than it might otherwise have been. U.S. Representative Alex Mooney of West Virginia has introduced legislation this week to provide for the first ever audit of the United States gold reserves since the Eisenhower administration. He's calling it the Gold Reserve Transparency Act. It's backed by the Sound Money Defense League and government accountability advocates. It directs the Comptroller of the United States to conduct a full assay, inventory, and audit of all gold reserves, including any gold in deep storage of the United States at the place or places where such reserves are kept. So even if the gold is encumbered by third-party obligations or otherwise impaired by bank financialization, in other words, rehypothecation, he's going to run into a lot of resistance on this one. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news here. And we're seeing all this propaganda coming out of corporate media about how the economy is booming and things are good and wages and salaries are going up a little teensy bit, so stop complaining. But of course, prices and are outstripping that. So the standard of living for Americans continues to decline. Middle class wealth is still less than before the recession following the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. And I'm not sure we ever really got out of the recession. Experts are now saying there's going to be another one next year. I think it's actually all part of the same continuous process. Global smartphone shipments plunged to the lowest level in years. Consumer spending obviously is just not there. Nestle is getting ready to cut 4,000 jobs. So I guess sales of chocolate bars are in decline as well. Party City is closing 45 stores, and here's where it's interesting. They're putting the blame on the lack of helium shortage. Now, it's no secret that Party City sells lots and lots of helium balloons, but it's not all that they sell. But everybody's now saying there's a global helium shortage, and Party City is pointing to that as to why they're having to close 45 of their stores. Now, over in Sweden, Sweden has been leading the world in pushing toward the cashless society. And many of Sweden's bank branches had stopped handling cash altogether. This was the new model. And apparently only 18% of all payments made today in Sweden are in cash. That's a 15% drop from the previous years. But now all of a sudden, the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, which is part of the government, is urging everybody to build up a stockpile of cash in case of emergencies ranging from power cuts, technology glitches, cyber attacks by a rogue government, or just the fact that those computers do fail on a regular basis here. Also in Sweden, they're having their own version of the Yellow Vest protest. It's called the Petrol Uproar, and they're basically arguing for lower fuel prices. And so far, they've gathered 250,000 supporters on Facebook in virtually no time. Getting on over into immigration, globalism, Ann Coulter is out there saying that charts are showing record levels of illegal immigration, and that the surge of illegal aliens under Trump is worse than under any year under Obama. Well, I don't think that's really anything to do with Trump. It's to do with all these open border globalist people who are now more actively encouraging the illegals to cross the border. But right now, illegal immigration is at 9 times the rate of 2017. They're just flooding in here. Just flooding in here. Now, down in Guatemala, their Association for Research and Social Studies did a survey, and they came up with the revelation that 1 million Guatemalans are saying it will be very likely they will migrate to the United States. We can't take them in. We can't even take care of the legal American citizens. It's insane to be just flooding this country this way. Now, there's a story out of Military Times about how a dozen companies have been selected to compete or to bid on up to $5 billion worth of horizontal construction projects over a 5-year period ending in 2024. I think you ought to get the company that did that border fence in Hungary. Doesn't look like it's all that expensive, and it's proven to be incredibly effective. Over in Great Britain, a Conservative Party member of Parliament has openly expressed his approval of Nigel Farage, saying that he is certainly doing a better job at leading than Theresa May. Now, this is Henry Smith, member of Parliament for Crawley, told local media that he can't believe a word Theresa May says anymore. And he lamented the fact that because of Theresa May's delay and mishandling of Brexit, Britons will have to take part in the European Parliament elections at the end of the month. Over in France, where the original Yellow Vest movement began, over 300 media organizations, journalists, photographers, and others have signed a letter denouncing the very often brutal violence used against members of the Yellow Vest movements and against members of the press themselves in France. The letter claims that press freedom in France has been suffering for years, but entered a new phase following the start of the Yellow Vest protests in November of last year. So, now we had that tragic shooting at the Colorado school, and there was a vigil Wednesday night for the STEM school Highlands Ranch shooting, and it was attempted to be hijacked by the radical gun control group Moms Demand Action, and basically got on the stage with a bunch of other Democrats and started screaming about gun control, gun control. The students all walked out. They're saying this was supposed to be a vigil. Not a political rally, but a vigil. Okay, so let's talk about computers and, in this case, political correctness. You see when you're on your iPhone and you're texting things out and you use a dirty word, it will correct it and change it to something not offensive. Well, Microsoft is getting ready to incorporate that exact same politically correct grammar system in their next version of Word. So this feature will recommend sensitive phrases like, we need to get some fresh blood in here. They will be transmogrified into new employees. I'm sorry, but that kind of seems to take the creativity out of the process. Over in Detroit, it's come on out that they spent more than $500,000 on a cell site simulator to track people's locations through their cell phones. Now, this goes back to October of 2017. They obtained a cell site simulator, which is the surveillance technology that locates and tracks phones by mimicking cell phone towers, also known as MC catchers and stingrays, which is a specific model of cell site simulator made by the Harris Corporation. Cell site simulators are increasingly used by law enforcement to locate suspects in investigations across the country, which sounds like a really good idea, except of course they're spying on non-suspects as well. And I imagine if somebody is a suspect and knows they are wanted by the police, they're going to take their cell phone and wrap it in 6 layers of aluminum foil anyway, at which point they become invisible. Okay, there is this GPS tracker. It's used as a panic alarm, and it has major security flaws that can leak the user's real-time location and allow it to be remotely deactivated. And there's calling for an immediate recall. So these are manufactured in China. The devices are bought in bulk and resold by several companies around the world. It's the little gizmo that you hang around your neck. And if you have a medical emergency, you push the button, it activates the microphone, and you are plugged into the cell phone system to get some first responders out there. But apparently, anybody who knows the phone number of that device can send a text message that will take control of it, to turn it off completely, turn on the microphone, track the person's location. Seems to get more reckless. Interestingly enough, Facebook co-founder Chris Hughes is calling for federal regulators to break the company up, saying that Mark Zuckerberg is simply too powerful and the company is an effective monopoly. Facebook is out there saying, we're not a monopoly, we're simply a successful American company. Hughes is now 35. He helped build Facebook from the beginning. It was a key creator in products like the new feed. He left the company in 2007 to join Barack Obama's first presidential campaign and liquidated his Facebook stock in 2012. Now, Laura Loomer is one of the people who got deplatformed last week, and apparently it's not going over well. She was in a live interview literally crying, saying, "My life is ruined due to social media targeting and banning." Paul Joseph Watson is going to sue Facebook for defamation after being falsely labeled a dangerous terrorist. I hope he wins. I think everybody that's been defamed by Facebook, there ought to be a class action lawsuit. Same thing with the Southern Poverty Law Center. Over at Instagram, they are now going to block any hashtags that seem critical of vaccines. And they're calling it, of course, vaccine conspiracy theories. But they're, again, it's no longer just politics. It's no longer just conservatives. It's protecting corporate profits. That's what they're doing. Actor James Wood yesterday said he will no longer be using Twitter after the platform suspended him, and then deleted a tweet that he had refused to take down after the platform received widespread scorn from lawmakers for its continued censorship of conservatives. And James Woods had put up a tweet paraphrasing Emerson, and it seems now they have deleted that tweet from his account. And he says, "Until free speech is allowed on Twitter, I will not be permitted to participate in our democracy with my voice. As long as Jack Dorsey remains the coward he seems to be, my Twitter days are past." I understand how you feel. Understand how you feel. All right, a little bit of good news here. Over in Pittsburgh, a grand jury has returned indictments against 2 Israelis who were running this dark web marketplace, and they have been indicted on charges of money laundering. They're accused of receiving more than $15 million from this dark web operation. The website was identified as deep.web, accessible under a slightly different name on the darknet, part of the internet, but hosted within an encrypted network and accessible only with anonymity providing tools. Deep.web provided users with access to marketplaces where vendors sold everything from illegal narcotics such as fentanyl, heroin, and crystal methamphetamine to assault rifles, malicious software, hacking tools, and stolen financial information. Well, that's 2. a lot more to get down. Cybersecurity experts are warning that there are two warring crypto mining groups who are now fighting a turf war over unsecured Linux servers. So there's this one hacker group named Pacha, and they are challenging Roke, and they're operating these mass scanning operations to look for open or unpatched cloud services and servers to infect them with a multifunctional Linux-based malware strain that will mine cryptocurrencies for them. Microsoft is realizing that they've gone into a decline. People aren't buying the new machines. Windows 10 was a bit of a disaster. They're trying to sort of revamp it and make it more attractive. But apparently Microsoft is going all the way back to Windows 95 to a tool called PowerToys. This was a very popular utility that had things like the Tweak UI, which allowed users to easily manipulate the Windows user interface, and a dozen other tools. Now, Microsoft is planning to publish previews over GitHub this summer, along with the source code under an MIT license, as it did with the recently open-sourced Windows Calculator. So they're trying to become a little bit more like the rest of the world. And of course, I think we reported was on Wednesday, Microsoft is now going to include a Linux kernel in future cuts of Windows 10. At some point, I think they'll make the leap and they'll just accept the inevitable and go on over to Linux. There's this image storing app. It's a cloud photo service. It's called Ever. And people were using it to store their images where they could get at them. And it turns out that this company is selling millions of people's private photos to develop and sell facial recognition software, all without their consent. This was being reported by NBC News. So in order to train the AI facial recognition software, it used the personal photos from the users. Apparently this is being developed by Ever itself through its new arm, Ever AI. Now, earlier in the week, I think we ran this report on how AI was doing false positives on people 98% of the time. 98% of the people that were identified as potential criminals by these systems turned out not to be. The Ebola epidemic over in the Congo is continuing to escalate. There were 126 new cases and 83 deaths between April 22nd and April 28th. And they're still being attacked by locals. The medical teams are being attacked by Congolese who think it's the medics who are doing this. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we're going to come on back with the last segment of Hour 2, followed by Hour 3 and the lovely Lady Claire. So stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about science, health, and medicine. And when antibiotics first came on out, you know, they were the wonder drugs, and they were being used on everything. But unfortunately, over the decades since, the pathogens have evolved. I mean, there's a demonstration of evolution right there, to be resistant to the antibiotics. And so there's this article over in Vox saying our antibiotics are becoming useless. And we are seeing a surge of antibiotic-resistant diseases that could kill 10 million people a year by 2050. This is from a United Nations report. And drug resistance is what happens when you overuse antibiotics in the treatment of humans, animals, and plants. When a new antibiotic is introduced, it can have great, even life-saving results for a while. But then the bacteria evolve. and then the antibiotic stops working, and we have a disease that we don't know how to treat. And it is a bit of a problem. Already, 700,000 people around the world die of drug-resistant diseases each year, pardon me, including 230,000 deaths from multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. Common problems like sexually transmitted diseases and urinary tract infections are also becoming resistant to treatment. Routine hospital procedures like C-sections could become more dangerous as the risk associated with infection increases. Okay, story that is coming out of Natural News. Apparently somebody is tallying up the numbers and discovering that the shingles vaccine is actually causing more cases of shingles than it was supposed to help prevent. So that will be fun. Okay, the corporate media is now finally admitting that 10% of those infected with the measles had already had the measles vaccine, and that measles vaccines don't even work after a few years. Say, when you get measles naturally as a child, your immune system develops a lifetime immunity. But the measles vaccine, whatever it's cooking up inside your body, it just doesn't last. They were saying the same thing about other vaccines like Gardasil, where you have to come back and get repeat shots over and over and over again. Okay, little bit of good news. This has to do with the Insys Therapeutics. This is a pharmaceutical company that sold a fentanyl-based painkiller, otherwise an opioid, and a jury has found multiple top executives guilty of racketeering charges and contributing to America's current opioid epidemic. Now, in the case, the jury deliberated for 2 whole weeks before issuing a verdict against the company's founder, John Kapoor, as well as 4 former executives. And they basically found these people conspired on how to drive sales of the drugs in unethical ways, bribing doctors to prescribe the product, and misleading insurers about patients' need for the drug as well. Okay, we got to take a break here for station identification. We're going to be back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And for those of you watching on the YouTube video stream, assuming that it's still working, this lovely creature sitting next to me is Lady Claire, with her unique perspective on the world. So what's the first thing you want to talk about?
I think it's very interesting. The president of Mexico now wants to decriminalize all drugs and negotiate with the U.S. to do the same. I think it would be a great thing for them to do. And apparently this plan has been put forward by the administration of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO for short, which is causing this to be looked at, because the problem with prison is that by the time the person gets out of prison, they probably have not had any therapy for this, or they don't have an incentive not to use again. And this so-called war on drugs has been an abject failure, Mike.
Well, of course it's an abject failure because too many elements within our government and that of Mexico are making money off the drugs. The reason for keeping the drugs illegal, I mean, you're told they're dangerous, they're immoral, and so forth, but it's to keep them profitable. Think back to Prohibition, when alcohol was banned in this country, and people went on drinking anyway. But the alcohol became insanely profitable. It gave rise to all these gangster families. It literally reshaped the American political system.
Oh, heck yes.
Until finally everybody was sick and enough of this nonsense, where prohibition was repealed. And, you know, it sort of locked the new configuration of the government into place. Today, of course, it's these drugs. Because they're very inexpensive to obtain, and if you have the favored channels to get into the United States of America, you can make a lot of money. And it's no surprise that many of the illegal immigrants streaming across our border are carrying backpacks full of illegal drugs because they know they can sell them and have a big chunk of cash with which to do whatever it is they're planning on doing in this country. But there are countries where these drugs have been decriminalized. And they don't have the crime problem, And as a matter of fact, the number of drug users is going down because you don't have the dealers going on out there offering free samples and trying to get people hooked.
Yeah. Portugal did this a number of years ago, and with some statistically high rates of success when they advocated treatment rather than prison. And here's an additional story which I thought was interesting. North Dakota has very quietly decriminalized marijuana. Now, this is not the same as saying that it's completely legal. And apparently the law says that the first-time possession of up to a half of an ounce of marijuana is no longer a criminal misdemeanor.
It's an infraction.
Yeah. And I think this is something that needs to happen, but it's very different from what is called marijuana legalizations, which a number of our states have done.
Yeah, there are a number of states that have now legalized recreational marijuana, and much to the annoyance of the tobacco and alcohol industries, I might add.
Yeah. But it looks like a step in the right direction.
It is, but as far as this deal with Mexico and the U.S. totally decriminalizing all the illegal drugs, it's never going to happen.
No, you're absolutely right.
In fact, that president of Mexico better be wearing his Kevlar.
Oh boy, yes, I think you're right on that. And here we have something from Blacklisted News, and it comes from the Department of You Can't Make This Stuff Up. A Florida guy could lose his home for having long grass in his front yard.
Yes.
Yesterday, the city of Dunedin, Florida, did something really interesting. Excuse me. It authorized the foreclosure of a private home in order to collect fines the city assessed for having grass that was too long. So today, Jim Ficken, a 69-year-old resident of this town, is fighting back. He has partnered with the Institute for Justice, a national public interest law firm, to sue the city to end its abusive practice of saddling homeowners with outrageously large fines or even foreclosures for minor code enforcement matters. I hope the guy wins.
I hope he does too, because the circumstances here, basically, as I understand it, he had left his home to take care of, I think, of his mother.
Yeah.
She was, and he was gone for a couple of months. He had hired a gardener to keep the lawn trimmed. The gardener died.
Ooh.
And this gentleman didn't realize that the grass wasn't being cut.
Yeah.
And so the city was just piling on, another fine and another fine and another fine until it racked up this huge bill. And they said, well, we've got enough fines here. We can take this guy's house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really, that's sick. Apparently, we have interdicted a North Korean ship.
Yes.
With coal, which it was trying to sell illegally. And I love the name, the Wise Honest.
Yes.
Is approaching U.S. territorial waters. And I think we have a shout out.
Okay. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network.
And they confirmed, the FBI and federal prosecutors have confirmed this ship is approaching U.S. territorial waters, and the U.S. Marshals and Coast Guards are helping coordinate its journey. Mike, what the heck is up with Kim Jong-un between the missiles and the coal ships that he's not supposed to be selling?
Yeah,
what
because
is going on
the
right
U.S.
now?
has sanctioned North Korea. They're not allowed to sell any of their natural resources. And the sanction thing is out of control. And in fact, George Galloway was out there on TV saying, I've lost count of the number of countries the U.S. has sanctioned.
Yeah.
And ultimately, all that's going to do is encourage these countries to get away from the U.S. dollar and the SWIFT system, which is the mechanism by which these sanctions are being enforced.
Yeah. But what do you think is going on in Kim's head? We had the missile firings this week, the interdiction of the coal thing. What is he thinking? What is he trying to achieve with President Trump?
Well, basically, the summit didn't work too well. It could have. Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump could have made this work if they had gone on kind of like this we're going to do something good, then you do something good, then we'll do something else good, and you do something else good.
Measure by measure.
Measure by measure. But Donald Trump basically went in there with this attitude of, you give us everything that we want, and then we'll do something nice for you. He didn't lift any of the sanctions. In fact, he threw a few more on.
Yeah.
The military exercises are continuing off the coast of North Korea. And Kim Jong-un has signaled with these new missile tests that he's basically walking away from the possibility of a deal, and could easily go back to nuclear weapons research. As far as the seizure of this coal ship, it's just the United States thumbing its nose at North Korea.
Okay, all right. Did you happen to cover this?
No.
Okay. NASA, NSA, National Security Administration, is building its own HAL AI system. And Facebook is now developing brain-machine interface. And
I thought that's what this keyboard was supposed to be.
Okay, well, not quite. Think of 2001, A Space Odyssey, and the most memorable character, HAL 9000, having a conversation with David. And the person talking to this tech system said, we are essentially building this system. We are building HAL. And there was also a very ignored bombshell reported by James Bamford. Is this a gentleman you know? I seem to remember the name.
Yeah.
It was revealed that NSA's massive database of information, including social media, was being used to create an artificial intelligence system that would one day be able to know not where we are, what we are doing, but what and how we think. Mike, that sounds a little presumptuous.
I think that's a little bit out there, and I think looking at all the failings of AI we've seen so far, you know, it's going to be just another government boondoggle.
And apparently there is a device that's being developed which will be able to respond almost instantaneously to very complex questions posed by intelligence analysts. But as more and more information is collected, social networks, Facebook, MySpace, GPS tracks, cell phone geolocation, internet searches, Amazon book purchases, and even EasyPass toll records. And what they're talking about the future of this technology being and doing is rather daunting to me.
It's very scary. I mean, they're talking about the sort of things that you see in like the Bourne movies, where they're in this room with all these computer screens and they can instantaneously call up anybody's location and what they're doing, which doesn't exist yet. Okay. They have to specifically target an individual's cell phone before they can track them.
Right.
But what they're talking about here is a system that is tracking everybody at all time. I have some serious technical concerns about whether they can get it to work.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the fact that with that much information, what kind of processors are you going to use?
Yeah.
This thing could easily get bogged down in the wealth of its own information.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Plus, they're talking about creating something that is a general AI rather than a task-specific AI, and nobody's been able to build a general AI that can talk like HAL 9000 yet.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some very clever language programming out there like you have on Siri, but it's not sentient. It doesn't really comprehend what you're saying.
Yeah. And what if these machines get angry with their humans? What's going to happen if they develop personalities that are not wonderful and gentle, you know? Okay. And I know that you covered this.
Yes.
Okay. There is something, though, that really bothered me. And one of the hardliner Iranian mullahs made the observation that $1 billion fleet can be destroyed with one missile. And here's the guy who said that. I don't think so.
No.
But it's Ayatollah Yosef Tabatabai Nejad. I hope I didn't mess that up. But we do know that they do have some decent missile capacity, not nuclear, but the Iranians, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Uh-huh.
And they do have missiles that, were they able to get through the screeners, could inflict serious damage on the Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't send the Reagan into that part of the world, because it's already radioactive.
Oh, boy.
And let the Iranians sink that as the false, or let Israel sink that as the false flag.
Yeah. We also got a note, was not a nice note, from Iran's Revolutionary Guards, and they said today that Tehran will not negotiate with the U.S., and that senior cleric made the comment I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And Lincoln Nimitz-class carrier is making its way into the area, and the commander said, if I need to bring it inside the strait, I will do so. I'm not restricted in any way. I am not challenged in any way to operate her anywhere in the Middle East. Now, he didn't specifically name the U.S. Abraham Lincoln during the telephone interview, but, you know, you can kind of put that together. And this is hysterical. Iran has dismissed the deployment and underlying Bolton threat, and they're calling it fake intelligence or psychological warfare.
Yeah, Bolton's claim that they've got information Iran is about to attack. Again, Iran doesn't want a war. They're not a warlike people.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Saddam's nuclear weapons all over again.
Yeah, I'm hearing it and I'm feeling it too. And apparently one of the places our traveling Mike has gone was Baghdad.
Yes.
To pressure Iraq to join press against Iran. Iraq declines. And Tuesday he was down there in the panic. He was trying to trump up, pun intended, along with other U.S. National Security Advisor and Sheldon Adelson plant, John Bolton, about Iran supposedly planning to attack U.S. troops in the Middle East. And I thought this was wonderful. For his part, the Iraqi Prime Minister, Adel Abdul Mahdi, said in remarks to the press that Iraq will undertake to ensure the safety of some 5,000 troops in Iraq who are helping mop up some of the ISIL remnants. And at the same time, Abdul Mahdi said that Iraq would not participate in any economic boycott of any country, which is to say he declined cooperation with the Trump administration's attempts to squeeze Iran. And all of these trade blocks and sanctions and blockades, no UN backing, no international law is behind them. And Iran is still in compliance at this moment, as of 10 May, under the 2015 nuclear deal, according to UN inspectors. Now, I've never met a UN weapons inspector, Mike, but I would guess that their CVs would be big enough to choke a horse in terms of chemistry, all of that stuff.
Oh, they're definitely very good at that.
Yeah.
And especially they go into an environment where they're sort of hostile to the host country.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely looking for a violation of some kind.
Right, right. But I have to tell you, there is a little bit of humor in this. Because somewhere, the soldier turned diplomat, the Imam Muqtada al-Sadr, is laughing his head off at the absolute failures of imagination American diplomats must have if they thought for 1 second they could get a pass from Iraq. You know, he and Bolton could have had a conversation and avoided this whole thing, you know?
Well, Bolton doesn't want to avoid it. I mean, the goal here is, I mean, Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this some years ago.
I remember.
The United States intended to take control of the Middle East oil nations, and apparently Venezuela is being added to that list, in order to ensure that oil is trafficked around the world only in U.S. dollars to keep the rest of the world enslaved to U.S. dollar hegemonic domination, not to mention having to use the SWIFT system, whereby they can be flogged with sanctions.
Right. And it's ironic right now because this imam is the only man who is the most politically powerful, yet holds no office because his coalition won the last elections for their parliaments.
Yep.
And here's a piece by David Giraldi in Global Research. Again, if you haven't seen it, look it up, globalresearch.ca. It's a Canadian outlet. And what he's saying is pandering to Israel means war with Iran.
Yes.
And I'm looking around. I turned 70 yesterday, and I'm looking around to see how quickly this is moving forward.
It seems to be moving very, very quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're moving a lot of assets into the area, more B-52s.
Yeah.
Deployed to Qatar and apparently one other still undisclosed location.
Yeah. I fear it is getting ready to start, and I'm hoping that people can keep their families as protected as they can.
Yes.
If the stuff starts flying. And there was a claim by, of course, Secretary Advisor John Bolton and by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that there is solid evidence of Iran's intention to attack U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf. And again, Mike, why the doggone heck would they do this?
Yeah, it's a dumb thing to do here.
Sense.
And there is no solid evidence because we know that supposedly this intelligence came from Israel, which is not exactly trustworthy. And it's very vague. Israel basically came on out and said, Iran is getting ready to attack you. We don't know where, we don't know when, but get ready, they're coming for you. It's basically something that Israel would do before Israel launches a rocket at U.S. forces and assets in the area.
Well,
but again, with a carrier strike group there and the B-52s, why would Iran attack U.S. forces? And the answer is they don't have a reason to.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And we have another article about when we were the good guys. U.S. keeps invoking World War II.
I miss the good old days.
I loved it.
When we thought we were the good guys.
Yeah. And it's very troubling to me, these illegal, immoral wars around the world that the U.S. is continuing to fight. And
okay, we got to take a break for commercials here, so hold that thought.
I will.
We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're looking at this FBI story that apparently I'm sorry.
Oh,
my
thank
mistake.
You.
There.
Thank you, dear. Okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, okay. So apparently there was this FBI Special Agent Robert Wright came forward before September 11th, troubled by evidence that seemed to point to a foreign group planning an attack on American soil. Saudi nationals conspicuously training at flight schools and Israeli art students, probing security vulnerabilities in government buildings, set off alarms in government agencies. But the administration of George W. Bush, packed with PNAC alumni, ignored and even punished those whistleblowers. They wanted it to happen.
The Twin Towers were destroyed. The Patriot Act, which was, by the way, pre-written and ready to go when 9/11 happened, was rammed through a docile Congress, and less than a month later, according to General Wesley Clark, the decision to invade Iraq had been made, even as hostilities had barely commenced in Afghanistan.
Yes.
Clark was told of a classified memo from Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld that described how we're going to take out about 7 countries in 5 years.
Well, they're certainly off the schedule there.
And Iran is the only country on that list where the U.S. and its allies have not yet attempted a regime change. And
I'm sorry, what did you say there? Iran. Okay.
It hasn't had a regime change.
Well, they did back in 2009.
Yeah, they tried.
They tried and failed miserably. Okay. We have got ourselves a caller on the line. So, Terry in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Claire, I'm sorry I missed your birthday yesterday. I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
Got a question for you.
Okay.
If somebody comes up and says, you better go along with these illegal wars to take over the world and the oil-producing countries, if you don't go along with that, we're going to lose our dollar as the reserve currency of the world, excuse me, then you haven't seen depression like what's going to happen to us when we lose our reserve currency status. It's going to make the 1929 depression look like child's play. What do you say to them, Claire?
What I say to them is something that my late first cousin used to say when he and I talked. He said, Claire, this country has the brains to be working in partnership with other countries for usable energy. Cold fusion, I don't know. But if enough people were working together, it would be a whole new revenue source.
Well, I think he was talking about the economic dimension.
Right.
Because that is the major reason for all of these wars, is to keep the world under the Bretton Woods Agreement, to keep all the world economies dependent on the U.S. dollar. And because having become lazy and reliant on that petrodollar deal, the U.S. has allowed our manufacturing to decline, both in quantity and quality, and nobody wants our GMO agriculture anymore. So, that's what these wars are really all about. So the question is, should we go along with the wars? Well, if you think keeping the dollar, the number one currency on the planet, is paramount, sure, but I got to tell you, I think we're going to lose these wars. We're way, way behind that original schedule of 5 years. We're not doing well in Afghanistan. We're not doing well in Syria.
No.
And we're still stuck in Iraq. Are you okay?
I just got this thing. I was eating, and the phone rang, and I got on the air, and all of a sudden I got this. I apologize.
Sorry. Oh, no worries.
All right,
as
not
long
a
as
problem.
you're okay.
Anyway, basically, I understand there are people who think keeping the dollar, the number one reserve currency on earth, is important. Certainly the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury and Wall Street think that, but at what cost?
Yes.
Okay. Is it really worth saving the U.S. dollar at the cost of so many lives and so much destruction?
Yeah.
And I'm one of those who says, no, it really isn't. All empires fall eventually, and I really am still convinced that the United States government is headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse.
Yeah, just hope we don't have 50 years of Soviet-style communism first.
Well, that's certainly the direction Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are going, but polls are showing only 10% of Americans are comfortable with the idea of socialism, probably because of all the demonization of the Soviet Union we grew up with as kids.
Yes.
Right. Mike, I just got a request that next time you can't be on the air because you're under the weather or something, could you just turn it over to Claire instead of having a rerun? Just she can host the show for that day.
Well, I'll have to teach her how to run this rig.
And you remember, I have learned what I do at the feet of a master.
I got to wash my feet more often. All right, well, listen, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And what's your next story there, Claire?
This should be a little bit embarrassing to Amazon. It has been told to stop selling kids' school supplies that contain over 80 times the legal limit of lead. What is wrong? They have a pencil pouch that's over 35 times the legal limit of lead, 29 times the legal limit of cadmium.
That is nasty stuff. And what the heck is Amazon thinking?
Yeah. And apparently they're going to do some corporate reforms and, straighten up their businesses. But how much damage has this stuff already done?
Well, it's difficult to quantify, but yeah. And where is Amazon sourcing this stuff from? Is it coming from American companies?
I would tend to doubt it.
I mean, looking at the amount of money flowing through Amazon, I think that if Donald Trump wants to revive American manufacturing rather than throwing tariffs on China, is to basically compel American retailers to say, we're going to buy American.
Yeah, that would help. That would help. And then American manufacturers have to figure out what the price point is, where they're still going to get profitability, but they have a quality product.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
A big part of the problem, though, is we've evolved to the situation where the people at the top of these corporations are just reaping huge, huge amounts of money, and they're sucking it out of the system, and that means their corporations have got less money with which to lower the price points or even conduct safety tests.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it all goes back to money. The money'd rarely eat their own. Apparently, Amazon has agreed to pay the Attorney General's office $700,000, which will be used to fund future environmental protection efforts, including investigations into toxic children's products. And there's a quote here: "As a parent, when I buy products for my kids, I expect them to be safe, and all retailers must ensure that their products do not pose a threat to kids in Washington." You know.
Well, or anywhere in the United States.
Yeah, yeah. And with all of this, nobody goes to jail.
Yep.
Nobody goes to jail. In the articles in Zero Hedge, we have one that says that Trump is asking for a 1999 style stock market melt-up. And Trump is saying right now that could go up like a rocket if the Fed cut rates by 1%, but only because doing that would supercharge the bubbles that are driving our growth forward.
Yeah, and lowering the rate, that just helps businesses and the Wall Street money junkies.
Yeah.
None of this stuff is helping the ordinary American on the street.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is just the hard we've been left behind.
Yeah.
We have been left behind.
I
Okay,
agree.
we have another caller on the line here. This is Mark in Montana. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy. You were talking about Venezuela there earlier. I wanted to kind of relate a story to you that's very much related. I used to work for a company that had 6 rigs drilling in Venezuela pre Chavez, and it's not funny, but it is kind of funny what ended up happening. Chavez's troops came to one of the rig, and sometimes troops aren't real bright, sometimes they're kind of the bottom of the social economic class. And these guys told them that Chavez was coming for their rig tomorrow.
Oops.
So all 6 of them, of course, they're on the phone. They're talking to their boss in Tacoma, and their boss says, "Make the rig inoperable."
Yeah.
So
Yep.
they knew how to make it inoperable, and then they destroyed these rigs. And the parts were not replaceable because it was all proprietary.
Yes.
I hear.
The troops came back the next day, and I guess they didn't know. They tuned a bunch of these guys up. Chavez ended up kidnapping them, the ones that couldn't hide out in the jungle, and demanded ransom for them. But he had owed this company over $30 million in drilling expenses, and he just took their equipment and then just quit, refused to pay the $30 million. So I don't know if that's indicative of socialism. I think it is. It was definitely indicative of Chavez, but the guys tell the story. I wasn't there, and it was, I was a young man when it happened, but it was rather amusing, that they were foolish enough to give him pre-warning that Chavez was coming after their rigs the next day. And, these guys, they know how to make them inoperable. Those people never operate again. And they were old school rigs anyhow. They just had old school crews on them. So I thought it was kind of amusing, and the way these old timers tell it, it was kind of amusing. So I just thought I'd share it with you.
Well, you need to understand that the economic situation under Hugo Chavez was a little more complex. Chavez felt that he had been cheated by these U.S. oil companies. So that was really what led him to make that move, because he understood it would be provocative and it would result in retaliation. But Venezuela was under constant economic warfare by the United States. The United States had wanted control of Venezuela for decades. So we'd have to go back and we'd have to look at a timeline of the various actions. But Chavez felt he had just cause to do what he was doing.
I believe at the time, I think their oil company was named was either PIMCO or UNESCO. UNESCO. I can't
Yeah.
recall. I'm sorry. But that was state-run. That was a state-run company. So the oil companies really had nothing to do with Chavez. It was the contractors.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'll admit, in a lot of cases, contractors are pretty sleazy. But if he was always welcome to go somewhere else. He could always get a Russian company to come in if you wanted sleazy.
Okay, well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to get on back to Claire's news. So, what do we got here?
Well,
he's talking about a 1999 style melt up.
Yes.
And we know the stock market is manipulated. I mean, looking at it today, it started out just hammered by the realization that those new tariffs were going into effect. But over the course of the day, it got pushed up and pushed up and pushed up. So the investors had their traditional Friday happy ending. But again, the stock market isn't the real American economy.
No, not
the stock
by a long
market
shot.
is your local shopping mall and your local car dealership and your local job market and all the homeless and hungry. And all of this manipulation of the Federal Reserve to boost Wall Street does not make our lives any better.
No, it doesn't.
The only way our lives are made better is if high wages and salaries are brought back. And I know that the CEOs of these large corporations are going to whine and cry and say, oh, it's cutting into our profits, and I'm going to have to give up my bonus this year. But the wealth inequality in this country is at very, very dangerous levels.
Yes. And in retrospect, what the article said was that what happened in 1999, you had your Asian financial crisis, Russian debt default, and the resulting failure of U.S. hedge funds' long-term capital management. And that percolated around all the financial markets in 1997, 1998. And even though at that point the U.S. economic data was very strong, Fed Chair Greenspan cut the Fed rates 3 times in rapid succession in late 1998, and each time for a total cut of 0.75% in an effort to shore up confidence and help cushion the U.S. economy. But that can only work short term, right?
Yeah, it can only work short term. And basically, I think Trump is trying to get the economy looking really good because that's what he's going to campaign on next year.
Yeah. And hopefully this article concludes with saying they're working in anticipation to make sure that the U.S. economy does not slip into a recession.
Well, there's a lot of people who think one is coming, and I certainly don't want to go through another recession.
Nope.
We're hanging by a thread out here as it is.
Yes.
And so are a lot of people. In fact, without naming any names, we got a call from a friend who's having trouble paying the rent. And I don't know that we're in a position to be able to help.
Well, teensy bit.
All right,
we'll talk about that later.
So,
and
by the way, one more time, a heartfelt thank you to everybody who has donated. We are seeing it coming on in. We're replying to it, and it really does help. It really, really does help.
It does. I have become a good friend of my crock pot again in
Yes,
these times,
yes.
And I'm kind of relearning how to use it. And to people who like to cook out there in our audience, it does work amazingly well.
All I got to do is put some snares out there for some of those wild chickens.
Right. And another article again in Zero Hedge. Last year, this writer asked the question, will Trump torch the global economy on the bonfire of his vanity? And he says it's a resounding yes.
Yes, I concur.
Yeah. And he wrote after Trump pulled the U.S. out of the JCPOA, Trump apparently wants to remake America and the world in his image while undoing anything that Obama touched. We have a leaked memo explaining this plan. Nothing Trump has done since he's been in office has been contrary to this goal. Overthrowing the theocracy in Iran, in fact, it has been a 2-stepwise move in this direction with each decision he's made. Now, he's pushed this plan in Iran to the extreme. He's fomented a trade war with China and threatened sanctions on anyone doing any business with Iran outside of its borders. And now he is tariffing,
the strategic metals.
Yeah, yeah. And, what he does, what he knows, and what we see, he's so far away, excuse me, from anything that's remotely reasonable. That's all he knows. Double down, tweet more, I won't use this word on
we can't
radio.
use that word on the radio.
Be a not nice human being. Excuse me. I'm so sorry.
Okay, let me turn you down. Okay, go ahead and cough. All right.
So what is happening now, China is shifting more of its oil purchases to Iran, flaunting U.S. sanctions.
Yeah.
Will the U.S. seize Chinese company bank accounts? What happens when Russia and the Syrian Arab army wipe out the last of the U.S.'s proxy in Idlib and Hama, while Turkey stands by and lets it happen? Back in 2017, when Trump was threatening fire and brimstone on North Korea to get them to the bargaining table, now it looks like Xi Jinping and Vlad Putin went along with it to try to get him some wins he needed to solidify his power in D.C. But it's very strange out there. I don't know how many of the rest of you who are listening and watching feel just a complete disconnect between what you are seeing and hearing and what you know is really happening.
Yeah, it's just all so disjointed, and Trump may want to remake the country and the world in his own image. I don't get a sense that he's got an image. I don't think he came into the White House with a real vision of what he wanted this country to be. And again, he won the election mostly because people just didn't like Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
But he has turned out to be an incredible disappointment.
Yeah.
And now we're stuck with him for at least the next 2 years.
Yep.
And I don't think we're going to get to the end of his term without being in a full-on global war. I mean, we're at a world war already when you look at how many countries the United States is operating in militarily. So we are in World War III. Get used to that idea. But it's going to get a lot worse, and it could even go nuclear. I think that if the United States is not able to get what it wants in Iran with conventional weapons, they will resort to the nukes.
Yep. Because right now we do not have the troop strength. We do not have the weaponry. We do not have the money or the manufacturing so that we could have a positive outcome if Russia and or China come into the fray.
That's
which
true.
I think may happen sooner rather than later.
I tend to agree. I don't think Russia and China want to go back to a unipolar world underneath the United States of America. I think they're going to hold off war as long as they possibly can. But I think at some point it really is going to happen.
Absolutely. There was another article that I saw, which a couple of them that bothered me. Apparently, credit card delinquencies have reached an 8-year high this year. When people have to worry between paying their bills and eating, it's most likely a sign that the economy is not doing that well, and we have reached that point.
Absolutely. People are having to resort to those credit cards just to survive, and that's a trap.
Yeah.
That's what turns them into slaves.
Right. And as Michael Snyder said at The Most Important News, the truth is that you can't say that we have a booming economy until we have a year when the U.S. economy grows by at least 3%. And at this point, we haven't had that since the middle of the Bush administration. And there are all sorts of warning flags around us, The other thing, which we are going to see kind of very quickly, with all of these tariffs that President Trump has put on various foodstuff, the prices of food are going to absolutely go through the roof.
Well, food prices are going to go through the roof, and it's not just because of the tariffs, and people need to really wake up and start looking at that. I mean, I know the tariffs are having an effect. Apparently, Mexican tomatoes are going to go up by 35%. But we're also dealing with the fact that our own agricultural system got body checked with all this flooding.
Yeah.
And they got the same problem up there in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Because of human-caused global warming, winter stayed late. And coupled with the flood, it means the growing seasons are going to be very short. There are going to be no bumper crops. Then you have the fact that seafood taken from the Gulf of Mexico is not fit for human consumption.
Yeah.
You've got Fukushima toxifying the Pacific. There is not enough safe, healthy, natural food to support the human population. And food prices are going to go through the roof. If you have land around your home and you don't have an interfering city council, plant a vegetable garden now. Learn how to farm.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to take another break here for commercials. We're going to be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And Claire, your next story is?
Okay, well, as most of the world knows, unless one is living in a cave, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had their kid at some point this last couple of weeks. And great good, the kid's going to get a lot of love, structure, not only from mom and dad, but the rest of the family, best of teachers, best of doctors, etc., etc., etc.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Who cares?
I know.
Okay.
But I laid that out first about a woman who gave birth to a little boy. She was working for McDonald's, tried to drown the kid in the toilet.
Ooh.
And, you know, I do not understand how we have become so expendable. And I know one thing about me: for the rest of my life, I'm going to work very hard, even though I'm very far away from being a baby, at not being expendable. I think that's going to be your situation.
You're not expendable here. I think what we're seeing on display here at this McDonald's situation is just this attitude that is being encouraged in this country, that babies are expendable. And we see it in all these laws being passed to say that babies can be aborted right up to the moment of birth. We're seeing it in all these statements coming out of the corporate media that while it's inside a woman's body, it's not a human being, that we're supposed to just look at these children pardon me, as disposable assets. And that is definitely going to lead to this sort of a situation. My question would be, why wasn't this woman using birth control or insisting that her male partner use birth control, or once pregnant, go ahead and get an abortion or put the baby up for adoption, but to just try and flush it down the toilet?
I don't understand this. And for those of you who don't know, I am very much pro-life. I understand there are circumstances when it can't be allowed to go forward, but I am pro-life, and I've seen people who've adopted. I knew a couple of gentlemen, a partnership in one of our local churches. They adopted their two kids, and one of them had a mom who was a crack baby, a crack mother, okay? The kids are just fine. They're thoughtful, they're articulate, they're obviously being raised with a lot of love and structure. I wish we could get this for every kid, you know, on the planet.
I wish it too, but again, we're seeing this attitude being promoted that babies are just things, they're just blobs of protoplasm, and that they can be basically killed at the moment of birth. And it's amazing. There are these states trying to get these laws passed saying that if a baby does survive a late-term abortion, you treat it and you give it care and you keep it. And the pro-abortionists are saying, no, just throw it in the chop-up machine and let it go. I mean, how insensitive and heartless and cruel is our society becoming?
And that's
when babies are looked at like that.
And one thing I want to say, because I know we're close to the end of our time, I think any society should be judged by how it treats its most fragile.
I would absolutely agree with that. And there is the music, so it's time for Claire and I to get on out of here. Have yourselves a really good weekend. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here at Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com. Share them with other people. Please donate. We really, really need it. I can't tell you how badly we need your financial support right now.
we do.
So have a good weekend. We'll be
Take
back
care.
on Monday.
Aloha.
Aloha, America.